bit of exciting things, obviously. So if you guys have any questions, just let me know. So we want to make sure we're defining what an actual elopement is. We want you guys to know what the difference is between regular wandering and hazardous wandering. Really what's important about event reporting as far as matrix care and the RL Peer software, and really what is an event that we do want you guys to make sure that you're reporting. So with elopements and wandering, so we want you to know what to do when a code 10 drill is started. We want to make sure that every care area, no matter where you work, you know the process for that, because everyone has a system in place. So what is an elopement? So an elopement is a situation in which a resident with impaired cognition or safety awareness and or judgment successfully leaves a facility or secured area undetected or unsupervised by staff. And we do extend that to say if they're not able to return safely either. You know, we want to make sure that if a resident says that they're going out, that they're actually able to come back in one piece. You know, we don't want to send someone out into the village and then they get lost and have no idea where and how to return, right? So some elopement examples that have happened in the recent years, so not here necessarily, but a resident with dementia elopes out of a secured area, leaves the building, and encounters inclement weather conditions. The event is discovered when an employee realizes that a resident has not shown up to the dining room at mealtime. The resident location is unknown. This event began as a missing resident event, engaging the organization Code 10 procedure. The resident is found outside uninjured, walking away from the building. This would also include an 83-year-old resident who walked out of an unlocked door at an assisted living facility in Alabama around midnight. She fell into a watery pit at a construction area on the care facility's ground, and she actually drowned in the mud. In the middle of the winter in Colorado, a resident with Alzheimer's wandered away from the assisted living facility where he lived. His disappearance went unnoted for 3 hours. He was finally found alive, face down in a field, according to the state report. 3 months later, another resident wandered away from the same facility and was later found crossing a 4-lane road. And then lastly, a resident walked away from a nursing home in Florida, fell in a drainage ditch, and drowned. The verdict resulted in $1.8 million and $4.5 million in punitive damages. So elopements happen all across the United States. We want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we're educating our staff properly and that we're getting to the resident before something disastrous does happen. So an elopement attempt and the resident is actually seen eloping. So if there is an elopement attempt with a resident, they are going to be assessed by the nurse to determine what interventions are needed to help keep them safe. Once an elopement takes place, the resident will be placed on 72-hour alert for charting related to that attempt. And we want to make sure that we're taking the time to add a note into our charting if there's any kind of weird behaviors that we see with the resident, because maybe that could have triggered it. You know, if your resident is in their room and they start talking to you while you're getting them ready for bed about, you know, this cat that they keep seeing, or maybe they say, oh, well, my daughter keeps stopping by and bothering me, and you know that her daughter lives, you know, across the United States. We want to make sure that those are getting put into the touch charting system, or if you're a team leader, into the ID note section, because all of those things could potentially trigger us to an elopement that might be occurring. So all of those little things do kind of add up, so we want to make sure that we're documenting them properly. So what are we going to do during actual business hours when an elopement happens? So Monday through Friday from like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. is considered business hours. So the nurse or the designee are going to be in charge of the search procedures for a resident. So the nurse or their designee can use the walkie system or the iAlert system to call a code 10 and to have all the staff report to a certain area, right? We want to make sure that the nurse or their designee is handing out those drill parts to everyone. We want to make sure that you know the zone that you're supposed to search and that you really are supposed to be assigned to an area and report back within 15 minutes. Because we don't want people searching for an hour and not reporting back and your walkies don't reach that far or whatever might happen, because then we don't really know the status of where you are or if you found them or what might be the case. And then the nurse or their designee is going to make sure that gets documented in RL Peer. So what do we do for outside of business hours? So that's going to be any time after 3 p.m. and on the weekends. So the nurse or the team leader is going to be in charge of those search procedures. They're going to make sure that, again, they're using their walkie system and the Eiler system to notify staff to come to a certain area of the building. They're going to make sure that drill cards are handed out, and you might be given 2 drill cards in that situation because there might not be as many staff as there would be during normal business hours. And again, we're going to make sure that there's a time limit, whether that's 15 or 20 minutes for staff to report back. And we want to make sure that that gets documented again in RL here so that we have a running tally. So what happens if there's another area outside of Quell Run that experiences an elopement and we need Quell Run's assistance to search their area? So there will be a missing resident profile sheet that can be filled out. So we want to make sure that we're getting a photograph, which they should be taken from Matrix Care because that's going to be the most current and up-to-date photo that we have. So we want to make sure that's printed for staff to search. We do a campus-wide elopement drill every year, and that's because we want to make sure that staff know in each care area how to respond if another area is missing a resident. So it's important that we would follow the sheet or the photo or what our nurse tells us needs to happen during that process. And with this piece of paper, if we had to notify the police or something, these are papers that we could use, for our area when they respond. So where are these forms going to be located? So for you guys, in your health room, so all the way at the back, Megan set up a really nice tier system that has all of these labeled. You can grab the forms out of that, and they're all going to be labeled with code 10. They should have both the forms and the drill cards inside. So we just want to make sure that whoever is grabbing that information, that we have established someone as really the leader of the search, because we want to make sure that someone is staying with those forms throughout the whole process to make sure that everything is getting documented properly. People know who to come to if they find the resident or if they don't find them for their drill area. We just want to make sure that we are establishing the leader as soon as we can. So just kind of some helpful tips. Like this would be an example of one of your drill cards that we're double checking that the resident is not, in another resident's room or out with family. We want to make sure that we're noting if that resident has a particular friend maybe that lives in the village, have they gone there for the day? The information on how to contact that friend in the village would be in Matrix Care. So your team leader, your RCC, your nurse could look up that number. We could contact them and ask if they're with them and they just forgot to sign out. Want to make sure that we're utilizing that sign out book, that the family, their visitors, they all understand where that's located and how it's used and really the benefit for us when they use it. And we have code 10 drills 4 times a year on our campus. So we want to make sure that people are participating in that drill like it was a real drill. Because if there is an actual elopement, we need to make sure we know how to go through the process and then we're not scrambling, right? So what is hazardous wandering? So that's going to be an event of wandering where a cognitively impaired resident places themselves in a situation of potential harm or is unable to follow their established routines in a safe manner. So like in this image, maybe she's trying to go into the kitchen and it's after hours. Obviously that is going to be an area of concern, right? So we're going to go through some examples of what that might be. So a resident does not leave the secured area but wanders into an unlocked medication room and therefore has access to unsafe substances. In this event, the resident did not elope off the hall was not identified as missing, but the resident did engage in hazardous wandering that represents real or potential harm. If a resident is going into the kitchen after hours, therefore has now been exposed to an unsafe situation where burners, knives, and slick surfaces are present. And then a resident does not arrive at the dining room for dinner, triggering the missing resident response. A search is started and the resident is eventually located on the unit in another resident's room watching television. In this event, the resident did not elope from the unit and did not wander into a necessarily unsafe or hazardous situation, yet the resident was technically missing from a supervisor's perspective. In this case, missing resident procedures are appropriate. So do you kind of see the difference between if someone elopes out of your building into potential harm, as in they're staying in the building and go into potential harm? So there definitely is a difference, and they both need to be reported. We want to make sure that hazardous wandering is going into the RL system, as well as any actual elopement that takes place. So not all wandering is bad. We don't want people to automatically assume that if someone looks out the window that they're trying to get out, and we should pounce on that situation. You know, your residents have the right to roam the hall. They have the right to be active throughout the building. It's when they start going into areas that could potentially harm them that is when we're going to pay more attention and be a little bit more concerned. So we want to make sure that we're doing a screening upon admission to make sure that, you know, we're looking at their elopement risk to make sure that it's not, you know, an immediate jeopardy situation, and that we're updating service plans with information, and staff are notified of who is an elopement or a hazardous wandering risk, so ultimately we can protect the resident, right? So why do residents wander? So according to the Alzheimer's Association, an individual's wandering may represent a behavioral expression of a basic human need. So there are benefits to them wandering. So that can be some, you know, form of social interaction for them if they're walking around and talking with other residents or the staff. Maybe it improves their mood because now they're not, you know, caught up in their room the whole time. It might, you know, might help with their maintenance of mobility, whether they're actually using a walker or maybe they're using a wheelchair. Either way, using that movement is really good for them. Conditioning, strength, circulation, and function benefits go with that. And it could be, you know, preventing problems associated with any type of immobility like a pressure ulcer or something like that. So we want to make sure that people know, I mean, wandering may support the individual's independence and sense of control. So it is important that if we can support their wandering, not hazardous wandering, but healthy wandering, that we do that to the best of our ability. If you have a resident who maybe they need, you know, staff to walk with them and hold their gate belt down the hall, that we're trying to build that into their time with you so that maybe we can help keep them mobile for a little bit longer by providing that service. You know, we want to do what we can to keep them up and running, essentially. So how often does it occur? They do estimate that wandering occurs in 6 of 10 people with dementia, and that about 80% of elopements occur among older adults who wander persistently, you know, where they're maybe only staying in their room for 2 hours at a time, and they're up and walking, up and walking, up and walking. You know, we want to note any of that kind of irregular behavior. You know, if your resident during the waking hours, I mean, is down here all day and they're walking around, that's okay. But if they're wandering like at 3 and 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, that seems to be a little bit more concerning because are they not sleeping? Are they, you know, sleeping all day and they're up all night and there's not as much staff here to watch them? You know, we want to make sure that we're documenting those things as well. And they do estimate that about 1/4 of all elopements occur within 48 hours of admission to a care facility. So again, and sometimes that can happen because they elope on accident. They didn't get a tour, they don't quite know where they are, they just see a door and they go out, and staff are concerned because now they can't get back or they don't know how to get back in. So we want to make sure when residents move in that either their family or we're actively showing them where kind of these key areas are so that they don't accidentally elope out of a door, right? So is this an elopement? Your resident Jack was diagnosed with a UTI and has been experiencing some cognition concerns. He has not been at risk for elopements. Jack is walking the halls of your building and you notice him walking towards the lobby to the front doors. As you walk, Jack goes out the front door, looks back and forth, and comes back inside. Do we think that's an elopement?
No.
No. Well, why not? Right. And we had eyes on him the whole time as well, right? So, nope, definitely not. So yes, he does have cognition decline, and that's okay to be a resident with cognition decline. He does live in assisted living, so he does have the right to go outside as long as he's still able to return safely, as you guys said. You know, and moving forward, we want to continue to watch to see if he does make any other poor, you know, safety concerns moving forward. Because we want to make sure that he's not going further and further out and is no longer able to come back safely. Is this one an elopement? So your resident Jill is going to visit her friend Jane in the village, which she does every Thursday. She has always gone by herself and would make it home safely. This Thursday, she was found on the opposite side of campus trying to find the building. She could not remember where she lived or her apartment number. Another villager took her to the front desk where they looked her up by her name and found out she lived at Quail Run. A ground staff member drove Jill back to Quail Run. Do we think that's an elopement? Some people say yes, some people say no. It is an elopement. So even though she was able to do that regularly before. Now she's gotten to the point where she can no longer return safely. So she went out and now has poor safety awareness because she cannot remember how to come back into the building. So yes, that one would be considered an elopement because she cannot return safely. And if we had not, if we had not found her while she was out there, if she had even left the campus, or maybe it was dark and now we have to get the police involved, it could have been pretty disastrous. So then moving forward, that's not an activity she could go on by herself. We would have to work with, maybe a companion or staff or her family, or have Jane come and pick her up to take her out to the village to make sure that it's safe back and forth, since she's not able to do that successfully by herself anymore. So what do we do to help reduce the risk? Each resident who comes is going to be assessed to be a hazardous wanderer or an elopement risk. We want to make sure that they have an individualized service plan with the appropriate interventions in place. We want to make sure that people understand the use of the sign-out book, that families understand how important it is, that residents understand, and really that staff are checking to make sure that is done properly. We want to make sure that we have an activity plan that's that is put into place to help kind of distract them if they are an active wanderer with some elopement tendencies. We want to make sure that they have something that's a little bit distracting, because if you just sit in your room all day, of course you might want to go outside. What are we doing to help engage them in the process? We have alert charting for a reason. Are we alert charting when they have some kind of weird behaviors? Again, if they keep seeing weird things in their apartment, or hearing, maybe voices, or seeing old family members that are not in the state, how are we documenting that so that we can put something in place to help them before they might potentially elope? Are we involving the family members and providing an orientation or maybe a reorientation to the facility? So maybe when they came in, they were a little bit confused and disoriented. Now they've improved quite a bit and they don't quite remember, how to get to the dining room from their room, or maybe how to go to certain places in Quail. We want to make sure that we're providing them that information, and maybe we have to consult with their doctor or their pharmacist on the matter. But what is something that we do continue to do on this campus? We want to make sure that we have either current names or current photos of the residents who are at risk for elopement or hazardous wandering, so that staff can all kind of keep an eye out for them. We want to make sure that we're assessing our residents quarterly for a risk of elopement. We want to make sure that obviously you guys are trained on what those things look like, so that you guys can identify if it is hazardous wandering or it's an elopement. And we know that, no facility is elopement proof. We understand that, which is why planning is essential, that staff know how to respond in a Code 10, that staff know what that is. We want to make sure that people are actively engaged in that. So when it comes to documenting hazardous wandering or an elopement, it needs to go into RLPR and into matrix care. So it is really important that anytime a resident attempts to elope, elopes, or hazardously wanders, a report is put into the system. So every care area on this campus takes elopements and hazardous wandering seriously and puts a report into our RLPR system, and it needs to be entered so that we can investigate and prevent it from happening again. So it is really important that we're putting those key elements into a report. We want you guys to let us know, when was the last time you saw the resident? That's a key question to ask. What time were they actually found? When did you get eyes on them again? Who found them? Because again, it's important to know, was that someone from grounds who found them in the village? Was it you personally who noticed that they were missing? That's all really important information. When we did find that resident after they eloped, what did we ask them? Did we ask them what they were doing, or where they were trying to go, or what they were trying to do? Maybe they told you that, someone lured them out here. Again, is that a hallucination or was that truthful? We want to make sure that we know the answer to that. And we want to know where they were found. If they were found right outside Quail, or were they found all the way down by Mennonite Home? That's all really important information. And did they have any injuries, or did they report any injuries to you along the way? We want to make sure we know that. So overall, with event reporting, we want to make sure that staff kind of have a general understanding of what that looks like for us, because event reporting, is extremely important in your line of work. So why is it so important? Because it lets us know what's going on within our organization. we want people to report, we want people to document, we want to know all those key important processes that go there. If we're documenting and someone needs a higher level of care, your documentation supports that. So we want to make sure that's done thoroughly and timely. With our event report, so if someone falls and they have a fracture, if someone has an elopement and we put in an elopement report, we have to report that to our insurance company. So it is really important that we know all of this documentation to be precise, accurate, and timely so that we meet the deadline for our insurance company. We need to make sure that if you have any type of suggestions, that you have an opportunity to let risk management know. And when risk management does get to be involved in the falls or the elopements or any type of event, it helps us really to offer suggestions or solutions to those problems that maybe are a little bit outside of the box, or maybe it's something that another care area has done that was successful and now it could be implemented here. So we want to make sure those are being done regularly. And we really want to make sure that people know, we talk about trends and solutions, any type of preventative measures at committees all across campus. We have compliance, risk, quality assurance, quality assurance, performance improvement, safety. There's a whole slew of committees that we're actively trying to help support the residents and the staff by going to. So it is important to make sure that we're tracking this stuff regularly. So what events do we want to make sure that staff are reporting? Obviously falls are incredibly important, and we want everyone to understand what the definition of a fall is. So a fall is a sudden, uncontrolled, unintentional downward displacement of the body to the ground or to another object, which excludes falls resulting in violent blows or other purposeful actions. So if a resident walks over to another resident and just pushes them over, that's not a fall, that's a safety security assault, right? And we also want to make sure that if a resident, if they're walking, maybe to their wheelchair and they end up not having control and they just fall down onto their bed instead, that would be considered a fall because they did not intend to fall there. It was not controlled. It was an uncontrolled fall. So it doesn't just mean that they fall to the floor. They can fall to a chair, to a bed. It doesn't really matter. If it's uncontrolled and a downward displacement, it's going to be considered a fall. So it's important that we all have the same idea of what that is. On the other hand, if you have a resident who says, well, I got down on the floor because I had dropped, a spoon and I'm trying to find it, and now I can't get back up. That's not considered a fall because they intended to get down on the ground. You guys kind of see the difference? Medication event, so an error occurring in the medication use process that reaches the resident. It's really important that we're documenting these as well. We want to make sure that that's thorough and timely. A safety security conduct event would be something like a verbal or physical assault, maybe an unwanted visitor that's in the building, any type of theft, or maybe just kind of an unusual occurrence like choking, a heart attack, something we don't really know how to put into the system. That would be a safety security. A skin and tissue, we obviously want to rule out any abuse and neglect that might have occurred, and it's obviously a CMS and a state requirement that we investigate them. So obviously any bruises that are larger than a dime, skin tears, pressure ulcer wounds, good catches, something that was caught by luck or chance before it reaches the resident. It's really important that we're documenting our good catches relating to intercepted falls. We want to make sure that if you catch a resident in the hall, maybe they're supposed to be using a walker and they don't have one and they're just holding onto their handrail as they're walking. Maybe they're stumbling but they catch themselves. Those are really important things to document as well. And then elopements and hazardous wandering, as we've already discussed. So we kind of want to show you what, this data that you're putting into RLP really shows us. So if you look at, this is 2018, the first quarter, you had 117 falls just in Quail Run, which is an insane amount of falls, right? This last quarter of 2019, you only had 57. Last year, just on evening shift, you almost had as many as you did the entire quarter this year. So when we use this data, we can start to look and see, well, what has changed from that first year to this year? So what have we put in place to help this number decrease? Because we're still reporting, but we're having less falls that are occurring. And we like to think what we're doing is we're implementing training programs at started this last year to make sure that you're understanding what falls are, fall education, how to take vitals, some techniques that we can do to help our residents. We're training staff, your team leaders and RCCs on how to enter events into the RL peer system on a regular basis. We're not just training people once and then we're done. We're making sure that's a regular conversation. We've improved the line of communication between your nurses and your administrator and making sure that flows a lot better. We've updated training programs, essentially your orientation process across your entire department. So we want to make sure that you understand who risk management is, you understand who your administrator is, who your nurse is, and who to go to when you have those problems. And those changes really have helped decrease your guys' fall numbers, pretty drastically, as you guys saw. So, we want to make sure that everyone is asking the same questions after an event. Who is the resident and, who's involved? We want to make sure who's telling you about this event. Is it the resident? Is it their family that's telling you that they fell? We want to make sure we have those details. What happened or what does it look like happened? We want to make sure that we're asking the resident, what were they trying to do? If the resident tells you, I was trying to go to the bathroom, we want to make sure that's given to the team leader, to the RCC, or whoever's filling out the report, so that they kind of have a game plan going into it on what they were trying to do. Because by the time your nurse gets there, your team leader, the resident might not remember what they were trying to do at the time. When did this happen? Were they trying to accomplish, an ADL? Were they trying to, brush their teeth and they got dizzy? We want to know that information. Where did this happen? Was this in their room, a place that's familiar to them? Or maybe they were visiting one of their friends that lives here and it's an unfamiliar space and they fell there. Why did this happen? Is there a lot of clutter? Do they have some cognition concerns? Maybe some poor judgment or safety awareness? We really want to do a scan of the room to know anything unusual. If they have a cat, was their cat in front of their feet and they tripped over it and that's how they fell? That's really important information to know. And really, how could this have happened and how can we prevent it in the future? Is there something that we can do moving forward to help protect this resident? That's all important information to know. And really, what should we be asking the resident after an event? We always want to ask, what were you doing? What were you trying to do? That should be the first question that you ask, along with, are you in any pain? When did you fall, or how long have you been on the floor? If the resident has been sitting there, you're like, how long have you been here? And they're like, well, it's been about 3 hours, but I thought I would try and scoot over to pull the cord. We want to make sure that's thoroughly documented. Did they call for help, or did you just happen to find them on the floor? That's really important information to know. If they use a walker or some kind of assisted device, did we ask them if they were using it at the time? Because maybe they fell because their walker was in the bathroom and they were, in their kitchen area, right? And do you need to go to the emergency room? We want to make sure that if the resident complains of hitting their head or if they're in a lot of pain, that we're asking them if they need to go. With your environment, it's really important that the first person to respond to any type of event is really doing a scan of the environment. Because it is important to know, are the lights on? Are they wearing shoes? And are they wearing shoes that, have a back to them that aren't going to slip off? If they wear glasses normally, are they wearing glasses at the time? We want to make sure we're looking at clutter. Is the floor wet or dry? Is their walker and wheelchair by? Did they have an accident and they were in a rush to go to the bathroom and you can see there's a wet spot on the floor? Is their call light on? Really, what's out of place in their room? We want to make sure too that if the resident has an alleged fall, that we might not be a part of that environment, but we want to at least ask about the environment. So if the daughter says, oh, well, my mom fell when she was visiting my house, it's good sometimes to ask some of those questions. Oh, well, did she trip on something? And she might say, oh, well, I have a rug in my kitchen and it got turned up and that's how she fell. It's important just to ask those questions. If they don't remember, that's okay. But at least we want to ask to see if we can get maybe some more detailed information. And with RL peer documentation, again, this is going to be factual information. We don't want to put our opinions into that system. We don't want to mention that we have an event reporting software to the families, because this software is our internal use, and then for either the state or APS when they come in to investigate, We don't give this documentation to families. It's something that's just for us. If a family member ever talks to you about wanting records, let your administrator know, because they're going to talk with medical records about it. So it's important to remember, we can't just print off any documentation that they ask for. There's a complete process that goes with all of that. Make sure that we're documenting and we're quoting what the resident says happened and any delusions that they tell you about. And essentially, if we're in doubt, we want people to fill it out. So if you grab a paper fall form and fill that out, even if we determine later that it wasn't actually a fall, it was something different, we still want to know those things, because we'd rather put something into the system and realize that we don't need it than to not have it and have to report it, right? And really, we do want to be transparent, because hiding from events that happen in our care area isn't going to make anything better. It's only going to make it worse in the long run. So with the RAs and the team leaders, obviously the charting system within matrix care, we want to make sure for the team leaders who are documenting in ID notes, obviously Shauna comes and provides education on how to code those things properly. We want to make sure that we're writing, the time events actually happened. We want to make sure that that's consistent. We want to know how the family reacted when we called them. Are they upset? Are they happy that we were there? Are they annoyed? Did they not answer the phone? We want to know those things, because that could indicate, a greater concern with the situation. And when we report serious events to our insurance company, they want us to specify whether the family is upset, understanding, furious. They need to know those things. And we also want to make sure, we're documenting when someone does admit to your campus, how was that, how was that process going? Did you explain the call-like system? Did you talk to them about, the sign-out information? Did they take, a mini tour? We want to document that stuff, so at least we have proof that we provided them with additional education when they arrived. And we want to know if residents declined any support from us, if they declined to, get assistance getting up off the floor, if they just, they didn't want EMS to come, whatever that might be. And we always want to make sure that in our notes that we're putting full names into our system, because there's a lot of Amandas and Heathers and Joshes that work on this campus. We want to make sure we know which one. Because if we're writing, TL on a bunch of things and there's 4 team leaders that are involved, we're going to get confused on which team leader we mean. And then with the RAs who are documenting and touch charting, it's really important that vital signs are entered timely. We want to make sure that any important facts about the event are documented. So in the touch charting system, there's a little box that says notes. We want to make sure staff are utilizing that if they need to, because if you're doing your charting before you leave and you note that the resident was having some delusions and maybe you forgot to tell your team leader, we at least want to make sure those get put into the note box in your touch charting system, because everyone has access to that. And with our general reminders, we really just want to make sure that everyone knows. Our RL reports are read by at least 3 different people. Your ID notes are read by probably about the same amount as well. So we want to make sure that we're making those thorough, timely, accurate, and they're based in fact. We want to make sure that people remember, hiding from an event does not make it go away. It really just makes it worse. We want you to be open and honest in any investigation that you're involved in, whether you're a team leader or an RA in that process. We just want to make sure that it's accurate, and really to be aware of your surroundings when they're reporting these concerns, and kind of just be on the watch for any potential hazards that you might see. If you go into a resident's room and you notice, well, they have a bunch of rugs that could be a tripping hazard, maybe there's a bunch of cords that are running across the table, clutter, we want to make sure that that's getting documented, and you let your nurse know to say, is it okay if I move these things so it prevents a fall? Because I'm sure both of your nurses would be excited for you to fix that problem, right, and prevent a fall. So we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you guys have questions, just let me know, but we really do, thank you guys for, all the hard work and dedication. You put in so many reports, and it's really great to see that, because we want to encourage that reporting, because it really is important to the culture of safety. So that's all I have.